Good morning. Alrighty, it's right at 12, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Brooke Keto. I'm a program coordinator here at Alzheimer's Services. Thank y'all for joining us for another one of our ADAPT series presentations. We have two more of them coming up later this year in September and November, so I hope y'all join us for those as well. I'm going to be sending up a follow-up email after the presentation, which is going to include a link to our evaluation that any social worker that's needing a CEU will need to complete. So I'll send that in an email after the presentation. Just some housekeeping for today. Today's presentation is recorded and your calls are going to remain muted throughout the entire presentation. To ensure that we have your participation recorded, please make sure that your first and last name are in your display name. Also, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and we will try to answer those during the question and answer portion of the presentation. Our presenter today is Ellen Dunn, who is our program director here at Alzheimer's Services, and she is also a social worker. She earned her master's degree in social work from LSU, along with a certificate of specialization in gerontology. Ellen has been a part of Alzheimer's Services for over 4 years now and works directly with families to provide support and education services to those diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias and their caregivers. Through her role at Alzheimer's Services, she has been afforded the opportunity to provide community education to other social workers, healthcare professionals, and family caregivers, with the goal to help them feel they're most prepared in interacting with someone on their journey with dementia. I do also want to say that I intentionally asked Ellen to do this presentation for us on adaptive language because I have had the privilege to learn a lot from her in my own personal experience working with her here at Alzheimer's Services and in years previous whenever I worked with her at a care facility. So she has extensive experience in intentional communication and adapting communication whenever it's needed. So I am very happy that she is available to talk with us today and share some of her talent and skills with us. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to you.
Thank you, Brooke, and thank you for the wonderful intro. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Like Brooke said, my name is Ellen Dunn. I am the program director and social worker here at Alzheimer's Services. A lot of times I'm on the other side of the camera in Brooke's position doing lunch and learn. So it's kind of cool to be on this side doing the actual presentation. So thank you all so much for joining us today. And I really hope by the end of this presentation today that a lot of you walk away with some new skills that you can really put into use today with your loved ones or those that maybe you work with who are dealing with a diagnosis of dementia, that will really help you to communicate with them in a way that you feel confident and comfortable with. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on my presentation. Okay, so before I get really into the actual content of the presentation, I really wanted to show this video. I think this is a really powerful video. Some of you may have even seen it before. So what you're going to see in this video is validation therapy that is being done by Naomi File. She is the one doing the therapy. And it also stars Gladys Wilson, who is a nursing home resident. And so I want you guys to see this today, and then after that, we'll really jump into the presentation.
When people are very old and deteriorated and no one enters their world and they're just sitting there, they will withdraw inward more and more. And their desperate need for connection is all now inside. And if a person is all alone, even if they're very, very deteriorated, there's a longing for this kind of closeness. Mrs. Wilson, hello. You want me to sit? Can you see me good? Gladys Wilson is a wonderful example of a person who was in the phase of repetitive motion, where people use movements, repetitive movements, because they don't have any more speech or very little speech, but they have human needs that need to be expressed. You're crying. Crying, you have a tear right here in your face. You have a little pain. I want me to touch you. You're very sad. Can you see me? It's scary. You afraid? And if this person sits with their eyes closed, rocking back and forth, and maybe there's a tear coming down, there's a need there. There's a little tear that's coming out. Do you feel it? You feel a little tear? If you gently use touch, and I touched Gladys Wilson for the fingertips right here on the cheek, is where the mother usually touches a child. If you touch an infant there, it looks up, and every cell remembers where it was touched by the mother. And often that person knows, even if they can't say a word at that moment, they won't talk, or they don't want to talk, but there's a communication, and that person is no longer alone. Can you let me in a little bit? You think? Just a little? You think I could be with you and Jesus for a minute? Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. I used music, because when speech is gone, music, especially with Gladys Wilson, it was religious music, because there's emotion tied to it and safety tied to it. So I used her old church song, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. What I did was, when she moved, I moved with her. And when I was singing, because she didn't sing with me, so I matched the intensity of my voice to the intensity of her movement. And pretty soon, for a split second, we became one person. Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so. So at one point, when she got very quiet and very peaceful, and my voice became very quiet as hers and very peaceful, and my breathing slowed to her breathing, she pulled me to her, and I moved with her. And for her at that moment, I believe I was a symbol of her mom. He's got and others. The breakthrough doesn't happen every time. Person will not always open their eyes and look at you. But if you keep trying and you keep centering yourself and really look at that person and really mirror their movements. Maybe not this time, but the next time you come, you'll have a communication.
Okay, so I really wanted to show that today to kind of kick off the presentation. I've always loved that video. I think it really shows how powerful of a tool communication can be and how important it is to be a strong communicator and really meet the needs of those with dementia that we're communicating with where they are and adhere to them in that place. Okay, so first, I kind of want to quickly touch on the 10 warning signs of dementia. So the first of those warning signs, and I'm going to just kind of read over these and then I'll really get into this, is memory loss. And then we also experience difficulty performing familiar tasks. We see problems with language, disorientation to time and place, poor or decreased judgment, problems with abstract thinking, misplacing things, changes in mood or behavior, changes in personality, and loss of initiative. So yes, these are warning signs. So when we think about these, and I'm not going to go super in depth into the warning signs today, if you really want to know more about these individually, I recommend you watching Brooke and I's Lunch and Learn, actually from April. We kind of do a deep dive into these 10 warning signs. But when I think of these also as 10 cornerstones. They are 10 very common symptoms that we see with any dementia diagnosis. And I think when you look at these and you hear them, one thing that I want everybody to kind of keep in mind as we talk today, if you are a caregiver of a person with dementia or a healthcare provider or a social worker who is regularly interacting with a person with dementia, you've seen one of these things. You may see more than one of them at a time even. And so all of these things, when they come into play, just think about how all of them make communication more difficult. You know, you cannot ask for help in the way that you want. You cannot say necessarily what you need. You can't convey your needs in the way that you're used to. So it just makes everything that much more difficult. And so that's really why we're here today, to talk about how we can adapt our language to fit the needs of those that are experiencing this. And then just another side note, you might see my little box here. I'm going to be using an abbreviation, an acronym throughout the presentation. You'll see PWD. That's just to indicate person with dementia. And really, it's just so I didn't have to type it. I've put it on PowerPoint several times. And so when you see PWD, that's what it's indicating. Okay, so let's start out today talking a little bit about how communication with our loved ones can change once they receive a diagnosis. What kind of things are we going to be seeing? What kind of things will be more difficult? What things may be even easier? What are the big changes? And I think just one thing we should keep in mind is when there's a diagnosis that's new to a person with dementia, when it's new for us, it's also new for them. So we're all learning together at the same time. So this list you have here, these are 4 of the most common communication challenges that we see with a dementia diagnosis. So that's going to be diminishes the ability to communicate. So trouble verbalizing their needs. If you've ever interacted with a person with dementia, you've seen this. You know that this is really difficult. Difficulty expressing thoughts and emotions. It can be really difficult to get out what they're feeling, what they're thinking. And sometimes when we see trouble with that, that's when we can see other difficulties, like maybe they have had a feeling for so long, or maybe they're not feeling well and they cannot convey that to you, then maybe you'll see that coming out as more challenging behaviors, maybe some frustration, some aggressive feelings, things like that. Also, too, difficulty understanding others. While it's difficult for them to express outwardly what they're thinking and feeling, it's also difficult for them to understand another person and what we're trying to convey to them. So we're really going to get into this one in particular today and talk about some good tips for how to avoid that, or how to ease that sort of. And then also too, keep in mind that visual is going to be more important a lot of times than the content of the conversation. So really meeting that person with visual cues, with good body language, things like that, so that your communication comes across as clearer and can really be received by that person. And I think another good thing to keep in mind throughout this presentation, anytime we're interacting with a person with dementia, is to feel empathy for them. Put yourself in their shoes and imagine how it would feel to not be able to communicate our basic needs. You know, if I think about it, I think I would feel really frustrated. I think I would feel awkward in certain situations. I would feel uncomfortable. I'd probably also feel really left out and maybe lonely in a lot of certain situations. So I think just kind of keep in mind, maybe put some keywords in your head of like, how would I feel if this were me, if I was struggling with these things? And I think one of the big responsibilities that we have as caregivers and as healthcare professionals is to meet them where they are. And I think you also have to remember that in situations in communicating with a person with dementia or interacting at all with a person with dementia, we are the only people in that situation who can change. We understand, those of us without dementia, we understand that something is wrong, that this situation or this reality is not correct. And so we are really the only people in that situation who can change. We have to really meet them where they are and work with them from there and really get into their reality. So let's talk a little bit more now about getting into the reality of a person with dementia. Okay. So on this slide, what you'll see is the 3 R's. So I think the 3 R's is one of the most helpful tips that we use here at Alzheimer's Services to teach caregivers how to communicate with a person with dementia. I think, like I was saying before, one thing that's really necessary is that we enter into their reality and we meet them where they are. You're probably going to hear me say that over and over again today. I cannot stress the importance of that. So as you can see, their 3 R's are reality, reassure, and redirect. So first and foremost, let's discuss reality. But I think before we talk about reality, we kind of have to talk about how does the brain work and I think it's really vitally important to understand the reality of a person with dementia. So you may have heard this example before, but I'm going to reiterate it because I think it really outlines what a person with dementia's brain kind of can look like sometimes. So if you think of our brains like a really, really long filing cabinet, and all throughout our lives, we have been storing memories in those filing cabinet drawers, nice and neat and chronologically. They're sorted by date, they're sorted by celebration, accidents, bad things that maybe happen to us, good things that happen to us, they're all nice and neat and in order. And anytime we need to recall a memory, use our brain for a certain skill, when we don't have a cognitive impairment, we can easily access those things. We can pull those things in order. And we can say on June 6th of 2003, I was on this wonderful vacation with my family. This is who was there and this is what we did. Now, when a person develops a dementia diagnosis or develops dementia in general, or Alzheimer's disease, any of those forms of dementia, all of that kind of goes out of the window. It no longer becomes easy for their brain to do that skill. So if you kind of think about it, that those papers that are categorized so nice and neat in those drawers, they are just flowed out all over the brain floor. And when it comes time for their brain to recall something or find access to information, their brain's really scrambling. They're picking up those pieces and they might pick them up in an incorrect order. They might mix up dates, they might mix up words, things like that, but it's just part of their disease. So whenever it comes time for them to utilize those skills and recall things, you can kind of see now why that can be really mixed up and jumbled. Maybe our loved one is in a different time period. Maybe they think we're younger than we are. Well, maybe that's just because their brain picked up those pieces in that strange order. And so I think also too, another thing to keep in mind is that our memories can really be impacted by things we see on TV or watch on the news. If you have like really violent TV shows on, or like Law and Order, things like that, those things can impact your memory bank, essentially. Also things that maybe we've read in the paper, things you might hear on the radio, things you hear in other people's discussions. So kind of keep that in mind, and we'll touch on later on environment, but I think those things are all important in the environment that you're creating for this person with dementia. Okay. So now, knowing this, kind of knowing more about how the brain works and how the brain accesses memories, let's get back into talking about reality. So you can see how important it is to get into their reality, because like we said, we're the people who can change, they cannot. We can adjust to their needs and what they're thinking. So don't get me wrong, though, it's very difficult. This is very much a skill you have to practice, you have to learn. And I don't think this comes naturally to any of us. I think this is why I'm always telling caregivers and trying to advocate for that. Caregivers, we need to give ourselves grace. None of us grow up knowing how to do this. You may have taken care of another person with dementia, but the impacts and the effects of dementia are so individualized and so dynamic that you'll never meet two people the same. So give yourself grace and just remember that I'm learning too, and I'm practicing this. So now you may be wondering how to actually get into that reality. So let's talk about that. So if mom says, the sky is green today, well, then we're going to tell mom it's a lovely shade of green. If your dad lost his keys again, and he's wondering if maybe your husband stole them or someone in your family stole them or something like that, we're going to say, oh, Dad, I'm so sorry you lost those keys. And what you're doing by this is you're acknowledging what they're thinking is real. We may really know that those keys are in a drawer in our bedroom and they're not going to get access to them. But you're just saying, oh, Dad, I'm so sorry you lost those keys. There's no doubting what they're saying. There's no questioning what they're saying. It's real, because if it's real to them, it has to become real to us. So now the second part of those 3 R's is reassure. Now, one thing I think we really need to also keep in mind when it comes to working with a person with dementia is that this can be a really scary disease. There's a lot that changes in our brains and our bodies and in our realities as we go through this. And so I think also a lot of times our loved ones may even recognize that something is wrong, but they don't quite know what to do about it. And so what our role in that is to provide them reassurance, to provide them comfort, to feel better about that challenging situation maybe they found themselves in. So we've already met their reality. Let's go, and we're going to use a situation here of the dad that lost his keys and he's convinced that your husband stole those keys. So we've already met his reality. We've said, oh, Dad, I'm so sorry you lost your keys. What we didn't say is, Dad, you didn't lose your keys, or Dad, my husband would have never stolen your keys, or Dad, you just misplaced them. They're not lost. We didn't blame him for anything, and we didn't discredit him in any way. So now what we're going to do is we're going to reassure him. So we've said, Dad, I'm so sorry you lost your keys, but I'm going to help you find them. And we're going to search until we find them. Or, Dad, I'm going to call my husband. Maybe he knows where those keys are. And then once we do that reassurance, we provide them with that comfort and that security that they can now trust us. We're going to help them in the situation. And we know that, and now they believe they're correct, that this situation is also real to us, which is just a good feeling. Then we want to use the redirection skill. And I think of the 3, this may be the one that is the most important and that you may use the most frequently, because it can be really difficult to sit in that false reality. It can be really hard to say, Dad, let's keep looking for those keys, when we really know those keys are in our room and we're never going to find them. We could look for hours and we're never going to find those keys. So then you need to find a way to get off of that difficult reality, to move away from that challenging topic. So then we can say, so we're getting to that reality. We say, Dad, I'm so sorry you lost your keys. I'm going to help you find them. We reassure them. But while I'll look in the bedroom, while I do that, why don't you fix us a snack? Or Dad, I'm going to look for the keys. Do you want to go for a walk while I do this? And so the whole goal of that, and this is obviously a very simplified example, I think, but also a real example, but you just take this and apply it to your situations. And if you ever need like input or advice on how to work this into any situation, just call me, call Brooke, call our counterpart Cheryl, and we can walk you through that. But basically the goal of redirect is to get them out of that difficult reality, get you out of that reality and move on to something else. So I'd really try to find things that they would like. So offer that Dad can go for a walk. Maybe he can get a snack. Maybe y'all could go for a ride, get an ice cream, something like that, that would be fun and safe for them to do, something that would really appeal to them. Okay. All right. So another part of redirection that is really common is sometimes what we could do is we can ask them for help. So in the example I gave of saying, Dad, while I look for the keys, why don't you go, get a snack? You can rephrase that and you can ask for help. And I think this is something that is really, really important. And I think if you work this into your day to day, you may see easier conversations happening. So let's talk a little bit about how to properly ask for help. And I think something too is that a lot of times we'll find ourselves in really difficult situations. Maybe we need to get our loved one to a doctor's appointment and they won't go. They won't get dressed. They won't get out the bed. Or maybe we have a loved one coming over that's going to want to visit with them, but we won't take our medicine. We can't get breakfast eaten, anything like that. So asking for help can help with situations like that as well. So let's kind of go over the bullet points I have to the left, and then I'm going to give you some examples of how you can work this in. So first things first, to remember when you're asking for help from a person with dementia is that always be open to receiving that help and work to find ways that the person with dementia can help. You have to first adjust your mindset. A lot of times we as a caregiver can get caught up in that I'm the one providing the care. I'm the one who is really leading through this situation, but we can also provide them with that sense of purpose to give them something to do. But you have to be open to accepting help. And you also have to find a way that is achievable for them to accept help and realize that it may not necessarily be helpful to you, but at the same time, it's helpful to them because you're helping them get to a different topic. You're distracting them from thinking about whatever could be stressful to them. So even if it's asking your mom or dad to fold this basket of laundry for the 4th time today, at least it's giving them something to do. Also, too, I just think people have a natural inclination to help. I think especially if anybody is out there caregiving for a parent, a lot of parents are just going to be adjusted to they've been the caregiver their whole life. And they really go through a role shift when now we become the caregiver of them. And so I think a lot of times asking for help or asking them to do things is just going to come naturally. They want to be able to help you. Also, too, I don't know anybody who doesn't enjoy feeling a sense of purpose. Life without purpose can be really challenging, and giving them something they can help you with is giving them purpose. There can be difficulty in taking initiative towards purposeful tasks. Like we talked about in those 10 warning signs, a person with dementia, a lot of times they're going to struggle to take that initiative. They're not going to be able to see you having a difficult time unloading the dishwasher sometimes and say, oh, let me go help her. That would be something good for me. So instead, we really have to be that person to take that initiative to say, hey, I could really use some help unloading this dishwasher or drying these dishes. We really have to be that guiding force to get them there. And also, too, it can be used to minimize challenging behaviors. So if we see that maybe our loved one's having a really tough day, maybe they're more stressed out today, they're kind of aggravated today, giving them something to do, something they might enjoy, can also help with that. And I think, too, we also have to keep in mind, this may not work for every stage of dementia. This may only work when our loved ones have more independence. But I think even if a person is in later stage, them just being in the room with you, that can be help. Just say, thank you so much for being here with me today. It just makes me feel better to not be here by myself. Something like that. There's a way you can meet the need of a person anywhere. And it also can be fun. It also allows you an opportunity to do things together in a partnership. And it just helps to better that relationship and better that trust that that person has with you. So let's go over some ways that you can ask them for help. And then maybe some simple tasks that they could help you with. So a few things you can try. You can just say, can you help me do this? Or it would be such a help if you would come with me to run an errand today. Why don't you get dressed? Why don't you get up, take a shower? So this would be good for a time that maybe they have a doctor's appointment you need to get to. Maybe you've canceled the last two because they won't get out of bed. Maybe you could try this. Or if you really want them to get out of bed because their grandkids are coming today, try something like that. Or I'm really having a tough time doing this. Can you lend me a hand? I know, like Brooke mentioned, we both used to work in a memory care facility. And a lot of times if a person was having a difficult time or a difficult day or just kind of looking for something to do, we'd say, I'm having a tough time. I really can't do this. Can you help me do this? Can you help me move these chairs to this table and, set up this activity, something like that. And then simple tasks you can give them to try. They can fold laundry. And like I mentioned, you can have them fold laundry, maybe wait an hour, dump that basket out. It's a fresh basket of laundry. They're folding it again. They can help dry dishes, light sweeping, and then you can adjust these to their needs, to meet the needs of where they are and how they've progressed in their dementia. And I think as well, to reference back to another lunch and learn, if you ever need ideas for activities, we have a couple of lunch and learns with activity ideas for all different stages of the disease. And you can find something in each of those activities that could be helpful that they could do. Okay. All right. So another part of asking for help is when we need something done, we have to explain to a person that's, oh, I'm so sorry. Go back. We have to explain to the person that's going to help us how we need that task done. We need to give directions. And giving directions plays a part into a lot of other facets of caregiving aside from communication. I mean, outside of this presentation today, there's a lot of times you're going to find yourself as a caregiver or a healthcare provider having to give directions to a person with dementia. So let's kind of talk about how to do that and how to make it achievable, because it can be very difficult sometimes. So first thing, step by step, meet them where they are and be prepared to modify as their disease progresses. You may have your loved one that you guys get in a routine. Y'all, every day you walk them through, maybe with cues. Hey, it's time to get up. And maybe they'll get up out of the bed. Maybe then they'll put their shirt on because you're telling them to, you're reminding them to put their pants on, put their shoes on. Maybe those simple cues and reminders are working. That may not always work. Eventually, they may need us to sit with them, next to them, and be the one to put that shirt on, put those shoes on. But I still think it's important, even if we're the one actually doing the task, to still walk them through step by step, giving those directions, giving information about what you're doing. And that's just a part of preserving their dignity as well. Also, too, anytime you're giving directions, keep them simple. I know I like when directions are simple. They're just easier to understand. And this also goes into giving directions to a person with dementia. Keep them simple. Keep them short as well. One sentence, one direction at a time. Make it achievable so that no one's feeling frustrated, no one's feeling overwhelmed. Also, too, try to avoid explanations for why things need to be done. It could really distract. I think this is a natural thing we do. I need this done because I have to be at this certain place at this certain time, and this would really help me here. I think that we do that naturally. But when you're interacting with a person with dementia, just say, hey, Mom, I need you to brush your teeth. I need you to put toothpaste on your toothbrush. I need you to grab the toothbrush, however simple it needs to be. You don't need to explain to her that she needs to brush her teeth because she has a doctor's appointment in 45 minutes and we really need to get out of the house. That's a lot of information that could simply distract. Keep it simple. Also, too, use body language and nonverbal cues. Keep in mind that their ability to utilize language may be difficult. So maybe they can't even understand what you're saying when you're giving them these directions. So really try to familiarize yourself with their body language. What types of nonverbal cues do they display when they're feeling certain types of things, when they're trying to convey certain things, and then try to mirror that, try to work with them in that. And I think we just keep in mind to keep calm and hang on. It could be frustrating, but it's achievable and you can get there even if it feels like maybe sometimes you can't. Just maybe sit back and think, could I say this a different way? You know, could this go a different direction if I try to communicate this in a different way? And then also allow for independence, but know when and how to help. Like we talked about in the previous slide, giving them purpose. Purpose comes with independence, I think, a lot of times. Allow them to do what they can do, but also be aware of when you can step in or when you maybe need to be around and available to help in certain things or remind them of certain things. Meet them where their needs are. And this is something that you just learn over time, working with a person with dementia or taking care of your loved one. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about body language. So body language is one of the other really important things to keep in mind when interacting with a person with dementia. Focus on preserving the dignity of that person and communicate with them how you would want to be communicated with and how you would communicate with anyone else and how you would expect others to communicate with you if you found yourself in that situation. How that person with dementia perceives us is so vitally important, and it really can change the possibility of successful communication. So the first one, so always remember face-to-face position, eye level, clear, simple language. You've heard me talk about this a little bit already, but always remember, get on their level, become their equal. If they're sitting down, you sit down too. If they're in a wheelchair, you sit in a chair next to them. If they're standing, you can stand too, or you can encourage that you both sit down together. Looking at them in the eye, communicating with them that way. Sometimes maybe all they're going to receive from you is a happy face, a smile. Maybe they didn't understand a single word you tried to say. That is communication in itself. And also just back to that clear, simple language. Also, too, body language, having good body language helps with comfort, confidence, and relationship building. Like we've kind of talked about, this disease can be scary. This person you're interacting with may not even really be familiar with who you are. They may not exactly remember their connection to you, especially if you're working in a facility where these people are living. They may not even recognize you. And so just kind of keep that in mind and just remember that we want them to feel safe, and also think of how if they're not even familiar with you, when we're asking them to do things like take a shower, eat lunch, come with me to go do this activity, take a bus ride. I don't know who you are. I don't want to go with you or do things with you or have you undress me to take a shower if I don't even know who you are. So making sure that you provide them with positive, comforting body language is so important. Another thing, check your space. Try not to sit too close. It can be really intimidating or uncomfortable. Also to note back, if they're not familiar with who you are or they don't know you, you could be their family member. Maybe today's just a really tough day and it's not connecting for them who exactly you are. When you first get there, try not to sit too close. Give them their space. I'm sure a lot of you feel this way as well, that when you meet a stranger, you don't necessarily want them sitting next to you, holding your hand, talking to you closely. Give them their space. And if you notice that they're comfortable with you, they're receiving you in a positive way, then you can kind of begin to use comfortable boundaries. Maybe you can sit closer to them, or maybe that's when y'all can hold hands, but just be careful on that initial approach. As you see in the next bubble, watch your initial approach. Smile, walk calmly, appear open. I think a lot of times where we get on the wrong foot is when we enter the room and to interact with a person with dementia. Sometimes we're feeling overwhelmed. A lot of times we're feeling overwhelmed. And we might enter that room with like 10 tasks in our mind that we need to get done. And we don't even realize that. Like maybe we don't feel stressed or feel tense, but that comes across. And so just be really mindful anytime you're going into an interaction with a person with dementia that they need to perceive you in a positive way. So as soon as you enter into a space with them, smile. Walk slowly, walk calmly. No one wants to be rushed into. And then also appear open. Don't come in with crossed arms or lacking eye contact or standing above them. Use all those tips we've already talked about and appear open and receptive to what they're saying. Also, too, monitor sudden movements. your tone, your tense facial expression. Like I said, even if you're not saying tense things, sometimes we just have a lot on our minds. And we need to give ourselves that grace to realize I'm not perfect. I'm doing the best I can, but today I'm pretty tense, but I also have to get these things done. And I need my loved one to also help me with these things. So just be careful of that. And then watch for their set of movements too. If they are backing up or they seem reactive in any way to what you're saying, maybe just kind of eliminate that situation and reduce that stressor. Try to learn and recognize their body language. Learn what they look like when they're upset. Learn what they look like when they're happy or when they're frustrated or when they're having a good time. Or is there music playing and they're tapping on the side of the chair next to them? They're probably having a good time. But is there music playing and maybe they're covering their ears or they're looking down or they're closing their eyes? Maybe this is a little overwhelming. Try to learn that. It only helps you in the long run. And then also too, use visual prompts. This kind of goes hand in hand with the last one. Notice things that they do, but also provide visual prompts for them. Sometimes if they can't understand what you're saying, maybe you could point to something, show them something, use your hands to indicate something. If you want them to brush their hair, maybe you can take that hairbrush and you can brush through your own hair. Use visual prompts. And maybe that will be another way that you can get communication across as well. Okay. All right. So one of my favorite tips that I recommend to almost every family that I talk to that is having a difficult time with communication. And that is called therapeutic fibbing, or you might hear it called therapeutic lying. So let's think back to our earlier slide of the 3 R's. We discussed a lot about how a person with dementia often lives in an alternate reality. As we discussed, because of this alternate reality, we often have to adjust the ways we communicate to best fit their needs. So that is when therapeutic fibbing comes into play. Now, I'm not going to act like I founded this. I got this tip from a great social worker that we work with all the time. She's just one of the most fabulous people. Her name is Rose Colley. A lot of you here may have worked with her, interacted with her before. She's amazing. And she actually taught us this term for this. And I just think this is such a good tip. Now, I do want to say that this can feel strange at first. It can be difficult to use this tip to work with your loved ones. But let's talk a little bit about what therapeutic fibbing means and what I'm trying to get at. So therapeutic fibbing is the concept of adjusting your communication to what you say to really meet the needs of your loved ones with dementia. It is something that people sometimes find themselves, I really think, like I said, intimidated by, because it's really not natural to want to be dishonest in a way to your loved ones. But let's talk about that here today and kind of ease some of those worries that I think a lot of people naturally have when they start using this technique. So this technique really can be used to ease agitation and frustrating questions. If I did a poll here today of who's been asked some of these questions, we'd probably get a lot of raised hands. I can see there's 40 people in the audience. We probably get 35 people who have been asked these questions before. Things like, where's my mom and dad? Where's my lunch? I'm starving. Maybe this person just ate 10 minutes ago. When can I go home? Well, maybe this is their home. They may be thinking of their home as where their mom and dad live, but maybe their mom and dad passed away 15, 20 years ago. So I think our first instinct is to respond to this person that we love, this person we know, with honesty. But I think also consider if this will really help. Do you think if this person were in their mind, if their brain was giving them rational thoughts to think, would they be asking these types of questions? And so then I think we have to answer in a way that meets that need, meets that thought where their brain is at. And they may not be satisfied with the honest response. I know I wouldn't be satisfied if I didn't remember where my mom and dad were and someone told me that they passed away and I forgot that. That would be really upsetting to hear. Sometimes the honest response, the real response, can leave them feeling more worried and sometimes agitated, frustrated. So let's try to avoid that because our loved ones benefit from this, but so do we. And so also another thing I think keep in mind too is that whenever we find ourselves in these difficult situations and we answer with those honest questions, our loved ones may not remember those discussions. They may not remember those answers we gave them. But if your mom is asking you, where's my parents? And we have to be the one to tell them that they're deceased, that's really hard on you as well. And that person has dementia. They may forget that conversation minutes, hours, days later, but we don't. We as the caregiver, we don't. So we then find ourselves as that frustrated person, left with those feelings, left with those emotions, and now we have to sift through them. So basically, when you're using therapeutic fibbing is when we get these challenging questions, we just answer in a way that would meet their need. So where's my mom and dad? Oh, they ran to the grocery store. They'll be back in 20 minutes. And if they ask you again in 20 minutes, the same exact question, and they forgot what you said, you can give the same exact answer, or you can alter it another way that will ease their anxiety. I think another thing too, you really have to keep in mind when you're using this tip is that your answer has to fit the lifestyle of that person with dementia. If you're telling them, if they're asking for their mom and you're telling them, oh, your mom's at work, she should be off in about 30 minutes, she'll be here soon. But maybe their mom didn't work. Maybe they were a homemaker their whole life. They're not going to go with that. They're going to catch on to you and they're going to say, that doesn't make sense to me. So I think this tip really applies if you work in a care facility or care community with people with dementia. Learn your residents, learn their life and meet them where they are. Because if you're giving them answers that don't make sense, then this tip is not working. You really have to work with them in things that they will understand to be real. And just focus, anytime this can feel weird or strange to you, just focus at what we're doing is soothing their agitation and calming their anxiety. And I think what a gift it is that we can give them that. That's such a gift that we can provide them with less anxiety, less things to worry about, and less things on their plate. Okay, so let's go over some do's of communication. So first thing on our do's list, and these are things that I would try to work into your routine as much as you can. Work with their schedule. Be aware of your loved one's needs or this person with dementia's needs. Do they do better in the morning? Do they do better after they've had breakfast? Do they like to talk in the afternoon, maybe over a cup of coffee? Meet them where they are. Check on your tone. Always be observant of this. A lot of times we'll hear it's not what you said, it's how you said it. And you can be saying the nicest, kindest thing, but if you have a harsh tone or a rushed tone, it's probably not going to go across well because they may not really know what you said, but they might have heard you. Keep the company and the conversation small. Try to keep conversation groups small. One-on-one is probably best, even sometimes two-on-one, but more than that can really be overwhelming to a person with dementia. And allow for breaks. If you're interacting with this person and you see that this is too much for them, take a break, walk away, just give them a minute to kind of regroup and maybe you can try again later. Remove any background noise. If you're in a person's home and you're trying to talk with them, but the TV's blasting, maybe there's music playing, that's going to make it difficult. Reduce any noise. Also too, if you work in a community, there can be a lot of other conversations. There's a lot of other people who live here. If we really want to communicate with our loved ones and really talk with them, take them to their room. Maybe take them to an area that has less noise. Use and observe verbal cues and gestures. Like we've said before, keep an eye out for their verbal cues, the things that they're trying to convey to you, and then use them yourself as well. Include a connection to the people that you reference. A lot of times just naturally in conversation, we're talking about other people. We might be talking about our siblings or our nieces, nephews, things like that. Connect that for that loved one with dementia. They may not remember exactly who these people are, how y'all are all connected. So you can say, Mom, yesterday I saw Johnny, Sarah's son. You can connect those things for them. Make it a little bit easier to understand. I think this is one of the most important ones. Help them to feel heard. A lot of times when our loved ones' communications abilities diminish, they may not be able to use words in the way that they used to or really at all. So maybe they communicate with sounds or just with eye contact. try to respond to them in some way. Give them some way to show that I hear you, I'm listening to you, I'm receiving you, and I'm going to comfort you, and I'm going to take care of you. Help them to feel heard. I don't know who doesn't feel better when you enter a conversation like that. Also, too, touch is a huge form of communication. Like we talked about before, be observant of space and boundaries, but touch is a huge form of communication. Sometimes just holding a person's hand helps them to feel that comfort and that safety. Also, I think as a caregiver, you hope for moments of clarity and you relish in that. If your mom had a really good day today and she remembered some things that maybe she couldn't talk about 3 weeks ago, you appreciate that. And whenever you have really tough days, you keep those things in mind, write them down so you can refer back to them. And just remember that I'm doing the best I can. And this was a really good moment in a really tough situation. And also, too, this is something that I think is vital. We have to encourage others towards positive and inclusive communication. One thing in particular that comes to mind, and I have it written down here, but is doctors' appointments. A lot of times doctors are in such a rush, such a hurry, that when we bring our loved one to an appointment, they're just going to want to talk to us. They think we know everything. They think we're the person who's going to communicate all their needs. And sometimes they may not even act like that loved one is there with us. I don't appreciate this. I wouldn't want this for my own loved ones. And so I think if you find yourself in a doctor's office in that situation, you remind yourself that you are the advocate. In a couple of slides, we're going to talk about that you are the expert in this situation and the care for your loved one. And you say to them, I want you to communicate to my mom or my dad or my sister and talk to them as well. This is their diagnosis. This is their disease, and they should be involved as well. And it's okay if they don't understand. It's okay if they forget, but don't allow for them to feel left out of the situation. This is their appointment. This is who they should be communicating with. Also, family members, things like that too. Okay, some don'ts of communication. Don't go for challenging questions. Don't say, do you remember this? Or challenge things like that. Don't argue. If something is wrong, let it go. Don't point out mistakes. Don't ever assume they don't remember things. Don't enter a conversation thinking that your loved one's not going to know anything. Just try to work around that, work with them on that. And then the next 3, don't talk over them, talk about them, or talk down to them. Okay. And I'm looking at the time, so I'm just going to zip through it. I'm going to speed up some of these slides. Okay. Preparing family and friends. So like I just said, remember, you are the expert. Whether you're the power of attorney, you are their spouse, you are the person this person with dementia has chosen to live with, you need to remember that you are the expert. And when other people try to go against that is when you need to remind yourself, my loved one chose me for this reason, and I am the one that spends the most time with them. I'm the person that knows their disease the best. I'm the expert. So preparing family and friends to interact with your loved one can be challenging sometimes, but I think first and foremost, one thing you can try is to provide them with opportunities for education. Really, in dementia care, knowledge is power. And the more you know, the more you can help your loved one. So they can attend our Lunch and Learns, our ADAPT program like you're attending today. They can attend our Making Sense of Sense series. They can read the 36-hour day, all kinds of things like that. It'll also help those families and friends to understand that each day or moment is different. Flexibility is key. You know, maybe mom had a really good day yesterday, but not a good day today. Maybe it's not a good time for visitors, or maybe we were planning to go out to lunch, but now maybe we'll just sit outside and have a cup of coffee. Help them to understand the disease will progress and things will be different in the future. Just because we had a really good visit today and these communication things worked, doesn't mean they might work again in 3 months. We kind of need to adjust. And then talk with them ahead of time. Provide them with ideas of conversation topics, questions to ask your loved one, how to ask them. Provide them with communication do's and don'ts. Things that you and your loved one might communicate about that you know they can talk about. Tell your family and friends those things. Help them out. And then provide them with ways that they can help you. A lot of times, family and friends, they may be, maybe it's difficult in their schedule to visit our loved ones with dementia, but maybe they want to find ways to help us. So you tell them what you need. Even if it's come and sit with your parent for an hour while you run to the store, tell them. Okay. And then another thing as well is be prepared that things could not go well. Sometimes we enter into conversations with a person with dementia, and it ends up that people are frustrated, people are angry, maybe someone's yelling, something like that. That's okay. That happens, especially when we're communicating with a person who has challenges with communication. So think about it. Is this communication making things more frustrating, more confusing? Are they even understanding what you're asking them? So what do you do when you find yourself in this situation? First thing to do is slow down, wait it out. If you can safely exit the room, walk out of the room, take a minute, go into a whole separate space in your home, give it 5-10 minutes, come back in, have a fresh start. Don't bring up those topics again. Don't remind them of what you were talking about, just a fresh start. And then kind of later on, when you have some time to yourself, reflect on that situation. Think about, how was I asking those questions? Is there anything I can do differently next time? And patience is key. So allow adequate time for responses. There is this 16-second rule that we use here at Alzheimer's Services that really takes into account how long it takes a person with dementia to understand what you're saying, receive your question, receive your statement, and then provide you back with a response. So for the sake of time, I'm going to skip the 16-second rule today, but what I would try at home is ask yourself a question, ask, what do I want to eat for lunch today? Put on your timer for 16 seconds and see just how long that feels. It feels kind of awkward. It feels kind of uncomfortable. So just keep that in mind. And also another thing is, I would consider 16 seconds to be the absolute minimum that it takes a person with dementia to understand you and answer you back, or to just like hear what you're saying. They may need more time than that. So just be patient. And I think sometimes if we find ourselves in a situation where we're not getting what we really want, they're not responding to us, the communication is going nowhere, keep in mind the acronym WAIT, W-A-I-T. And we use this for why am I talking? And just remind yourself, do I need to be communicating with them right now? Am I really meeting their needs? Maybe I can just sit back and just be in silence with them. Okay. And another thing to keep in mind is environment matters. Again, for sake of time, I'm going to ask Brooke to attach our home safety checklist that has good tips for the environment, because think about that environmental factors really play a part into how a person with dementia is receiving you. Keep in mind things like really bright lights can cause agitation and be distracting. Also, like having an uneven level of lighting can also be challenging. But also at the same time, try to change as little as possible so that things feel familiar. And then this last slide is a little bit different than the things I've already talked about, but I found this chart from the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, and I think it's really important. And one quote I want you guys to take from here today is a quote that we learned recently, that is, dementia is a disease and not a personality trait. And so we cannot talk about a person's dementia or a person with dementia like we would talk about people's personality traits. So just kind of reference back to this chart, because I think these are good things. And I think it just helps us to instill respect automatically for a person with dementia, preserves their dignity. If we avoid things like saying they have a dementing illness, but really they just have dementia, or that they're demented, or they have senile dementia, these are really things that are not helpful to people with dementia. And we really need to be those advocates and communicate about them in the same positive way that we communicate to them. Also, other common things that are really big challenges would be like behavioral expressions. So that maybe we would say this person's really challenging. This is just a change in behavior. Maybe this person's an attention seeker. Really, it's just an expression of their unmet needs. Or maybe this person's an aggressor, but really it's just the psychological symptoms of their dementia. So if you have any questions, I know that was kind of fast at the very end, but I will include my slides if you want to reference them, and you can always call me or shoot me an email. But I wanted to also leave some time for questions. Is there any questions, Brooke?
Thank you so much, Ellen. I know this is a topic that we could talk on for 8 hours. And so smashing a lot of it into 1 hour is really difficult. But I so appreciate all of your tips. We don't really have any questions yet, but we can allow for a couple of minutes for questions if anybody has any. Really, all of the comments are, people saying thank you, great presentation. So I can allow for a few, but just some comments saying thank you so much, great information. So on the follow-up email, I'll include this presentation with all of these slides, so that if you needed to reference back, you'll have those within that email. I'll also send the evaluation for any social workers. And then Ellen briefly referenced the home safety checklist whenever we're talking about environment. So that's something as well to reference when kind of setting up your environment to make your communication or anything like that most successful.
And I also saw in the chat someone called therapeutic fibbing the noble lie. I love that. I will take
I love that too. That's so sweet. Like putting a bow on a difficult topic, which is what we do a lot. So I love that too. Okay, we did have one question, and we can answer questions as long as y'all need. This is the conclusion of our presentation. So if any social workers needed to hop off at 1 o'clock, y'all can go ahead, but Ellen and I are available a few more minutes if we needed to continue asking questions or answering questions. Okay, so somebody asked, I would like to know a little bit more about discussing person with dementia information with staff in restaurants and stores.
Yes, so this is a great question. So there's a couple of different things you can try. If you ever find yourself in a restaurant or in a store, and maybe the behavior your loved one is displaying is something that would be considered not typical, what you could try is, if you have a moment to where you could like sneak away to the restroom or be away from your loved one, you can tell the staff or that host at the table, the host of the restaurant, my loved one has dementia. You may say things may be a little bit different than a typical interaction with a person, so just be prepared for that. But a lot of times we'll find ourselves alone with that loved one. So what we would recommend in that situation is we have these cards, and I can also ask Brooke to attach these to the presentation as well. But we have these little cards that you can carry just like in your wallet or in your purse that says, I'm an Alzheimer's caregiver, and the person that I'm with today has Alzheimer's disease. And you can just kind of slip that to somebody when your loved one maybe is distracted. So if you're in a restaurant and they're coming to take your order, you can just kind of pass it off to the side. Same in a store. If your loved one, maybe you can find a way to distract your loved one, like, oh, look at all of those pretty shirts hanging over there, or all of those groceries. Let's go see if we can find a snack, and maybe you can slip it to a staff member in there. And that's a good way that you don't have to say anything. You're not drawing any attention to your loved one. And like I said, I'll ask Brooke to attach it, and it's just a form that you can print out and just have at home and cut out.
No other questions so far, just a lot of great feedback saying great information, great presentation. So I'll leave a couple minutes for other questions, but I do want to say Ellen referenced a lot some of our previous presentations that we've done. We record almost every one of our presentations and we post them on our YouTube channel. So in our follow-up email, I'll also link our YouTube channel because we try our very best to cover a lot of topics. And so we like to have that kind of as a wealth of knowledge for caregivers that they can reference back and watch some of these things in the past. So we have a presentation on therapeutic lying. We have a presentation on planning meaningful visits with family members, all of that good stuff. So, all right, well, it doesn't seem like we have any other questions coming through. So I so appreciate you, Ellen, for taking the time to share with us positive communication, intentional communication for us. And I appreciate everybody that's joined us for our presentation. So I'll send that follow-up email shortly, but thank y'all so much. Hope y'all have a great rest of y'all's week and appreciate y'all joining us.
Thanks, Brooke.
Thanks, everybody.